So welcome everyone. This webinar is being run by the Partnership for America's Children, which is also the national hub on the undercount of young children, and it is on complete count committees. We're offering it today because, as many of you know, complete count committees are a critical part of the 2020 census, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was really up to speed and familiar with them before the legislative session started. That's important because legislatures are really the bodies that can put the most resource into this effort, and if you don't get your complete count committee formed and funded in the 2019 legislative session, 2020 is going to be too late. So we're really hoping that you will take what you learn in this webinar and run with it, and it's similarly true of many of the local complete count committees and councils and stuff like that they also start in January. So this is very time sensitive, and we really wanted to make sure that everybody knew what a complete count committee did and how to get one set up and what features it should have. We have 3 speakers today. The first one is Nesreen Khashan. I want to say thank you particularly to her because she very kindly stepped in at the last minute after our prior speaker could not join us. Nesreen is a program manager for the 2020 and team manager 2020 Census Community Partnership and Engagement Program, and she's going to share with us the Census Bureau's resources on complete count commissions and committees, both statewide and local. Before she worked on the partnership program, Nesreen worked in the field for a number of years, and so she can talk about this from both perspectives. When she's done, we have Chen and Alana Vega. They're both with Advocates for the Children of New Jersey, and they worked last year on getting a complete count commission created in New Jersey through the legislature, and they will talk about that. Peter is policy counsel, and before joining ACNJ, he clerked for Chief Justice Shirley Abramson of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. He got his JD from Yale Law School and his BA from Indiana University in Bloomington. Alana is the Kids Count coordinator in New Jersey, so she's responsible for collecting, analyzing, and organizing state, county, and city level data related to the well-being of New Jersey's children. And she graduated from Bryn Mawr College and earned her MPP from Rutgers. Then batting cleanup today is Adam Sotak from NC Child in North Carolina. He's going to share with us what happened there where the governor created the state commission. He is the public engagement director at NC Child, where he leads their advocacy efforts to promote economic opportunity and improve children's health and well-being. He received his BSW from Appalachian State University and MSW from UNC Chapel Hill. So Nesreen, I'm going to turn this over to you, but before I do that, I just do want to remind everybody one last time that you need to keep your phones muted. I think I've muted everyone and just unmuted Nesreen, but you won't be able to talk, but you can put all your questions in this chat feature at the bottom, and we will take your questions that way. And Nesreen, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great, excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Deb, and for the opportunity to speak. Once again, I'm Nesreen Khashan with the Community Partnership and Engagement Program here at the Census Bureau. My job basically, among other things, is I'm the program manager for the Complete Count Committee initiative, and I hope to go into today's in some detail about the CCCs and what you might expect in the process of convening or joining one in your community. So first off, this module that I'll be going through is going to be based on the CCC training manual that's available. These training manuals generally are available when CCCs are formed and they need training. They generally receive these trainings from partnership specialists. Talked a little bit about partnership specialists, Census Bureau partnership specialists in a couple of slides from now. But they come on training day, come trundling boxes of training manuals, and that's when you might expect to get yours when it's time for that initiation. So first, higher level overview, and then we'll get into more detail about what CCCs are. They're a core strategic element of the partnership program for the 2020 census. And not just the 2020 census, we had them in 2010, we had them in 2000, and we know that they're effective in really getting the community to the table to get out a complete and accurate count. So the Census Bureau role in all of this is to work with tribal, state, and local governments and community organizations to get them to really encourage them to form CCCs across the country. CCCs exist to plan and implement locally based outreach campaigns, and they raise awareness of the census. And it's not just the campaigns and the activities that help drive participation, it's the composition of the CCCs. It's leadership, it's trusted voices in communities, it's gatekeepers. So it's not just the messages, it's the messengers as well. So keep that in mind when you convene your own CCC. So here's some guidance of background and structure of CCCs. Tribal, state, and local governments work together with partners in their communities to form CCCs to promote the 2020 census. Community-based organizations can also form their own CCCs. Community members are usually experts in the following areas: government, media, workforce development, business, education, that's K through 12, as well as university, higher ed, community organizations, faith-based communities, and then others as needed. So the 2020 census will be different than the 2010 census in some fundamental ways. We're using technology a lot more in the 2020 census to make it easier for individuals to respond. And for the first time, you'll be able to respond online, by phone, or by mail. And we're also using data that are public already to provided to cut down on household visits. So how may we do that? Well, in the past, when we conducted non-response follow-up, or as many people know it, the door-knocking campaign, we visit every non-response household. This time around, we're going to use administrative data to ascertain which housing units are vacant, so that we don't spend taxpayer resources knocking on homes that are vacant. So it's initiatives like that that really have enabled us to reduce the cost of the census using technology. We're building a more accurate address list and automating our field operations, and that has also helped us reduce costs while keeping the public's information confidential and safe. So here's a diagram showing the basic design for the 2020 census. We start over here with our address canvassing operations that began last year during an in-office address canvassing campaign, whereby clerks looked at two identical photos, one an older photo, one a more current photo of housing units, to determine if there was any difference between the housing units. So that was primarily how address canvassing was conducted. If they did spot difference, they moved those records over to another section. And next summer, it's almost 2019, and in the summer basically of 2019, we will have an in-field address campaign, but those will only go to a fraction of those housing units where the in-office address campaigners, address clerks could not find or found questionable status of housing units and needed further inspection and investigation. So it'll be a fraction of the in-field address canvassing than what we've done in the past. In the past, we literally went on foot to every household or every block in the nation. The second stage is where we are now. We're motivating people to respond through a robust integrated partnership communications plan. We do that by maximizing outreach using traditional and new media, using social media, of course, by developing ads to specific audiences. And you'll hear more about those two elements later on, hopefully in early 2019. But the third element of that, motivating people to respond, is working with trusted sources to inspire participation, and that means you, and that means the formation of complete count committees to get local partners on the ground working to inspire participation. So the third phase, of course, is actually counting the population, which the public can do by phone, by paper response, by internet response, and of course, if households elect to do none of those, there will be a non-response follow-up. And then the final phase is releasing the data first in December of 2020 to the President, and then by April 1st, 2021 to state lawmakers for purposes of redistricting, and then, of course, to the American people after that. So what are complete count committees? A CCC is a committee established by a tribal, state, or local government and community leaders or organizations to increase awareness and motivate residents to respond. They're essentially census ambassadors that play an integral role in the 2020 census. A committee of state officials and community members usually are appointed by the highest elected official of a tribal, state, county, or local government for the purposes of developing and implementing a census awareness campaign. A community CCC is generally comprised of a team of community leaders or organizations brought together to design an outreach plan. So often community CCCs crop up organically, and there may already be a county or a city CCC, but a community CCC might crop up to really address a particular low response area or a particular hard to count community, such as limited English proficient speakers, for example, or seniors or mobile millennials. And their focus is to encourage individuals in their community to respond. And of course, I just want to add that a community CCC can really increase its profile and raise its effectiveness by working in tandem with an existing larger entity CCC in the community and complementing each other's work. So when should a CCC organize? Now, definitely now. There are many that have already organized across the country. There are state complete count commissions that have already organized and have begun meeting, and there will be, of course, many more after we get through the holiday season. So state government CCCs are actually, or SCCCs, and the distinction between an SCCC and a CCC I'll talk about in a moment, can get quite large because they're run by state government, and they'll bring that many more people to the table. So sometimes in convening, they may elect to do a subcommittee structure, and these are some of the recommendations we have for how to break out subcommittees. You can have a government subcommittee, you can have a workforce development subcommittee, a faith-based subcommittee, education, one focusing on media, another on technology, perhaps working on search optimization, developing memes, social media campaigns, etc. One that's a community organization subcommittee, and another representing business. So as I mentioned, local government CCCs are formed by the highest so part of me, I really want to back up and just get, I forgot to quickly get into the SCC structure that I wanted to talk about. So let me do that very quickly. So I mentioned to you that there's a CCC and then there's an SCCC. So a state complete count commission is distinct from a state complete count committee only in that a commission might formalize its relationship with the Census Bureau by creating legislation or executive order pledging to work with the Census Bureau to ensure a complete and accurate count of the state's residents. So just quickly wanted to make sure I included that distinction. So back to local government CCCs that are formed by the highest elected official in local government regardless of size. So this local government, of course, would include cities, counties, towns, and villages, and they are charged with developing and implementing the census awareness campaign. And community CCCs, and again, these can all exist together simultaneously, tend to focus on probable low response areas or distinct hard-to-count community profiles. Again, the mobile millennial, the limited English proficient speaker, the college students, and so on. So they do tend to fill a gap in areas where there is not a government CCC, but they also may exist alongside of a government CCC because they may feel that there needs to be an extra effort when a particular hard-to-count community. And community CCCs are similar in approach, can be similar in approach to government ones in that they can have the following types of members in the community as part of the composition: business leaders, educators, media representatives, and so on. So just some key points about the CCC structure. CCC should be inclusive, addressing the various racial and ethnic, cultural, and geographic considerations of the community. And Census Bureau staff are basically there to help provide technical guidance, to help train CCCs, to provide recommendations. But at the end of the day, Census Bureau staff do not operate CCCs. CCCs are run by government or elected officials or community leaders. You decide who should be on your CCCs. You decide what you'll do in your CCCs. And then if you have questions, of course, the Census Bureau staff will be there to assist you. So I'm going to go over some of the different roles the various recommended subcommittee structures in these bullets would play. First, recruitment, then government, education, faith-based, media, community-based, and then business. First, recruitment. So the recruitment subcommittee would focus on helping to promote Census Bureau jobs. You would do that by maybe staffing resource fairs or local festivals, job fairs. You would work with Census Bureau partnership specialists to get materials out that we may provide about job openings, and you may also help partnership specialists secure space for onboarding employees for training them. So often recruitment subcommittee members consist of staff from local job training agencies or organizations. The government subcommittee would focus on basically including messages from all those local governments that normally interface with the Census Bureau, including the function of government that keeps track of new construction programs. And it also ensures that elected officials are aware of and are included in committee activities. Because again, you often need that prominent, trusted voice to be out there leading these activities. So they're often composed of elected officials, city planners, demographers, cartographers, and other government employees. An education subcommittee would focus on coordinating census awareness activities among various education levels. That would include statistics in schools, making sure that there's distribution and awareness of the program. Statistics in schools information is all on census.gov, but it's primarily a K-12 program, and a lot of educators aren't aware of it. There's also going to be a particular offshoot of statistics in schools that's going to focus on the 2020 census that the Education Subcommittee can help promote. Then the Education Subcommittee should have a higher ed component so that colleges and universities can raise awareness of this census among students housed both on and off campus. And of course, there could be a committee membership that focuses on English adult education, particularly English language learning programs. So these education subcommittees often comprise of education leaders, officials such as superintendents and principals, and administrators. You don't want to forget your charter schools or your educators or your students, and of course university housing coordinators as well. Your faith-based subcommittee would facilitate and coordinate census awareness activities between faith-based institutions and organizations. And the composition would primarily be, of course, faith-based leaders across denominations, but also ecumenical councils and seminary administrators. The media subcommittee would focus on messages to all households, and it would facilitate communication of CCC messages through multiple channels, including ethnic media, local newsletters, electronic bulletin boards, prominent bloggers, prominent social media influencers, local websites, and that sort of thing. We really shouldn't undervalue how much more social media of a role social media will play this decennial as compared with the last time. So they may be able to, for example, identify whose tweets are most likely to influence people to tune in. So they'll, identify essentially the social media influencers in a community, or even who transcend a community, who are just general social media influencers. They essentially comprise of local media representatives, both on the editorial side and the ownership publishing side, editors of newspapers and representatives of ethnic media. And then the community-based subcommittee focuses on coordinating the building of coalitions with community organizations that serve the need of various racial, ethnic, cultural, civic, fraternal, and advocacy groups, including immigrants and people with disabilities. The composition could include executive directors from community organizations, leaders of fraternities and sororities, and so on. And then the business subcommittee focuses on coordinating and generating census awareness activities that involve businesses of all types and sizes. And the members can include chambers of commerce, business alliances, neighborhood business associations, franchise owners and operators, and financial institutions, among others. But it also should have members of the county or city's largest employers on the business subcommittee. So keep that in mind as well. So the 2020 census runs into about 5 phases, and I'm going to go over each one. We're currently in the education phase through December of 2019. So this is when you should be forming and convening your CCCs and training them with help from partnership specialists, and developing your work plans, using perhaps census design thinking, census solution workshop process and methodologies to help ideate. And you should be holding regular meetings to report on tasks and other activities, including subcommittee reports. And it's definitely not too early to proceed with census awareness building activities and evaluating the effectiveness of them, so you can iterate or build from them or improve upon them. And you can set goals for yourself, such as conducting at least one census awareness building activity each month. The awareness campaign begins starting in January of 2020. You would be holding regular CCC and subcommittee meetings. You would be finalizing plans for activities surrounding responding to the census, since it would be just around the corner, reviewing task lists and subcommittee plans, continuing with 2020 census activities that you were doing in the education phase, but of course ratcheted up and more, certainly with more of a specific focus on response, finalizing plans for activities to encourage households to complete and respond, and then develop final plans for motivating residents who don't participate so that they're aware of when non-response follow-up begins. And then motivation runs from March to April of 2020. You should still be meeting regularly and reviewing your plans and sending lots of news releases, letting the public know, when NARFU begins, when forms are sent out, etc. Encouraging, really drumming up support to respond accurately and expediently, getting a plan in place for those non-response follow-up households, and working with the Census Bureau to provide, the Census Bureau, this last bullet, will be providing real-time response rate numbers starting in April. So evaluating these data so that you can determine where more outreach is needed. And then we have the action steps May and through July of 2020. This is, again, encouraging those non-responding households to be prepared for the door-knocking campaign, continue to meet and review your CCC plans. This is where you want to get ready to have your summary reports that you share with your partnership specialist. And then you just celebrate the success of the 2020 census, and you definitely want to recognize the work that you've done and your members have done, and follow that up with a thank you campaign for the community for their support and response. I'm going to gloss over some of these slides. You'll get in some of these nuts and bolts when you join or convene a CCC, but I do want to just quickly go over that some of the activities that were proven effective in 2010, PSAs, advertising campaigns, banners, posters, and billboards, print materials, faith-based activities, translation of materials, and local media coverage, including social media. I think in 2020, the story is going to be social media is going to play a much bigger role. It certainly played a role in 2010, but this time I think will play a star role. So when you get to your get your sleeves rolled up to start working on a CCC, you essentially first get into creating a work plan, and the first thing you need to do is identify geographically where your hard-to-count communities are and who they are, what are their profiles, and then we're going to have a robust integrated communication campaign that's going to feature advertising, events, and public relationship and partnership activities. And you'll hear a lot more about that from us starting next year. And the partnership specialist will be your go-to source for that information as we roll it out. And, of course, we all share the same objective, which is to surround every household in the country with credible and memorable messages. So just very quickly, some key dates of the 2020 census operational timeline. We're actually opening up area census offices, the early ones, as early as next month. Address canvassing that I mentioned, that select address canvassing will begin in August of next year. The remainder of the area census offices will be open by July of next year. And then Census Day, of course, we know is April 1st, 2020. Non-response follow-up begins in May. We deliver results to the president in December by the end of the year in 2020. And then, of course, we deliver redistricting count to state lawmakers by April of 2021, April 1st. So we have a tool out there called the ROAM, the Response Outreach Area Mapper, that will help you determine where your community's low response areas are. A low response score, as we call it, is a predictive analytic of census non-response at the census tract level, so it's quite granular. So essentially, if there's an LRS of 25 or higher, we're estimating, well, that would be, those would be the census tracts where you might want to spend your time. And essentially, if you see a 25 or any value, we're saying that that percentage of households in that tract will not respond, we predict will not respond via self-response to the census. You could access, there are some caveats here, and one of them is that these are based on mail-in responses. This will be the first decennial which you can respond online, and so we don't have that particular data yet because of course it's not been done until now. You can access the LRS and the data in it via the planning database and the ROAM, the Response Outreach Area Mapper. So very quickly, I'll give you a link to the ROAM at the end of this presentation, but this is a screenshot of the Response Outreach Area Mapper that's on our website. It's a public mapping application that displays the characteristics of these hard-to-count areas and produces that predictive analytic, the LRS, or low response score I mentioned to you. And it's only at the census tract level. Here's an example of an LRS score. So this is featuring Norfolk City in Virginia. By the way, census tracts, if you don't already know, are exclusive to counties. So if you see it for a city, it means the city is a county equivalent. So Norfolk in Virginia administers itself like a county. But otherwise, they're all bound by counties. They rarely conform to municipal boundaries. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at this example. But you see that the low response score, and you would, if you were on the road, you'd actually see the census tract and see, you know, what streets it was bound by in the east, the north, and south, and so on, so that if you wanted to go to that community, you would know exactly where to go. But you can see the score is 34.4, so that's estimating that about a third of the community would not respond via voluntarily, essentially. And the LRS score is cobbled together using a variety of considerations, including the responses of that census tract in the 2010 census, but also characteristics of the community, such as percentage of seniors, percentage of children under 5, percentage of limited English-speaking households, percentages of foreign-born. So you not only get a score, but you get a host of other data that may give you insight into why that particular score is as high as it is. So just quickly about partnership specialists, do your primary contact between the U.S. Census Bureau and the CCC. They're the ones who will provide those trainings and come trundling with those training manuals I talked about. They're your advisors and your information resources for CCCs, and they help identify census awareness building activities that are more effective. They meet with local governments in the area to encourage the formation of CCCs. They distribute materials. They provide orientations and training. They're your advisors. They assist in developing strategies. They attend meetings when they can. They tell you about the innovative work we're doing at the Census Bureau, strategies that we've researched that we know are effective, and that we share that out so that we can encourage you to employ those activities. And they just essentially maintain an open line of communication with you. If you want to identify the partnership specialist near you, as Deb said, she's going to share out these slides. So identify which regional census center serves you by just looking at the following table, and then contact them and let them know where you are and that you'd like to be contacted by your partnership specialist. And if you want to learn how to use the Roam, you can also contact or have your partnership specialist contact our data dissemination staff so they can help you learn how to use the Roam so that you can have a database strategy when you get your plan together as a complete count committee. So in summary, the CCC training manual has been created to give you the nuts and bolts of how to run a CCC and how to make them strong and effective. And CCCs, but it's really up to you to develop the strategies and activities that are focused and make the best use of available resources. Here's my contact details.
Nesreen, thank you so much. We're going to go on and turn next to our friends in New Jersey, but we will take questions to Nesreen and to everyone else at the end of the webinar. Please type them in the chat box. Peter and Alana? I'm sorry, hang on one second. I didn't unmute you. I unmuted Adam. Give me 1 second, and I'll get you unmuted.
Count cord.
There you go. Peter and Alana, if you'd start again, I apologize. I didn't have you unmuted.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alana Vega. I'm the Kids Count Coordinator at Advocates for Children of New Jersey. And today my colleague Peter Chen and I will be talking a little bit about census efforts in New Jersey and how we ultimately were able to create a complete count commission in our state. So first I want to give some background on ACNJ. We are a statewide nonprofit child advocacy organization, and we just celebrated our 40th anniversary. And during that time, we've taken on a wide variety of issues over the years. Recently, we added census to our policy priorities. So why was this? There are a couple different reasons for our focus and for New Jersey specifically why census matters. So first, we are a state with a relatively large non-white population, and we have a significant number of immigrant groups. Kids Count data shows that close to 40% of New Jersey's children live in immigrant families, and I'm sure as many of you know, these are groups that are historically have been hard to count, and so it just added to why we had to focus on this issue. The second is that as a Kids Count grantee and an organization that uses data to shape and inform our policy priorities, census data is really invaluable. So we have a personal need for data, and the census data is really valuable to us, but also to the groups for whom we advocate. Third is financial reasons. The potential ramifications of an undercount could have a significant impact on New Jersey, and many of the programs that could be affected, such as Medicaid and Head Start, are programs that we have previously advocated for, and it aligns with our current work. Also, as an organization, we have kicked off a campaign that really focuses on infants and toddlers in our state, and the reported undercount of children under the age of 5 really meshed well with that infant and toddler focus. And in our infant toddler work, we noted that young children are more likely to live in poverty in New Jersey, and they're also an incredibly diverse group when compared to older children, making them especially at risk for an undercount. And then finally, New Jersey has really never engaged in a robust multi-year statewide campaign to educate and to conduct research, conduct outreach prior to the census. And if outreach had occurred in the past, it was largely in the few months leading up to the census. So this is really an opportunity for us to get in on a statewide effort. So given those reasons, we came up with a plan and outlined our desired outcomes. So the first outcome that we really wanted was the creation of a statewide complete count committee. Second, we wanted there to be some level of state outreach, specifically targeting families with young children. So in the past, New Jersey has engaged in some impressive levels of outreach, such as when we enrolled folks for NJ Family Care, which is our state Medicaid and CHIP program. And we wanted that same level of engagement for census, in which every time a family with a young child is interacting with a state agency, there's some messaging about census going on. And then third, we wanted to mobilize child care, preschool providers, and any other groups who regularly work with young children to begin conducting outreach, as well as to make sure families were informed on census. So in order to make this happen, we utilized a few different strategies, and these were largely based on efforts that have been successful for AC&J in the past. First, we went to the data. So we created several different fact sheets. We did this for several statewide demographic groups, but we also created fact sheets for each of New Jersey's legislative districts and each of our congressional districts. And these fact sheets showed hard-to-count populations, but they also specifically highlighted small, medium, and large municipalities with high concentrations of hard-to-count populations. We also reached out to different legislators in districts with significant hard-to-count populations. We were sure to hand out our fact sheets to educate legislators on census issues, and then also to advise them of the importance of a complete count commission. And then finally, we wanted to partner with groups with whom we had an existing connection to get information out there. So I mentioned we had been doing this early childhood work, this infant toddler work, and so we have our early childhood campaign, and with that we have an existing coalition of folks, our Think Babies Coalition, who work with young children or their families directly. And then finally, AC&J is part of a statewide New Jersey Counts Census Coalition, and this is really spearheaded by the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, and that put us in touch with other advocacy organizations in our state working on census issues, or who work with groups that would be impacted by an undercount. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Peter Chen, and he's going to talk about some more detailed steps that we took.
Hi everyone, this is Peter Chen from Advocates for Children of New Jersey. I just wanted to talk about some of the steps that put a little more detail in some of those steps that we took. So the first is talk about data. As a Kids Count grantee, we always start with the data and try to get policymakers to see where our area of concern is. And so we developed these fact sheets with help from the Fund for New Jersey and using data from CUNY, which has made hard-to-count maps for the whole country that you can access on their website. And they provided us with some of the raw data to help develop our own fact sheets to focus on New Jersey. And we broke them down by legislative district, congressional district, and some hard-to-count populations statewide. And these helped us make targeted approaches to particular legislators. They listed the municipalities with high hard-to-count populations by demographic group, so different legislators could see that even if as a whole their district didn't have a high number of hard-to-count tracts, certain populations were particularly hard to count. So with those fact sheets, we then went about doing the outreach into our existing legislative advocacy. When we went to our congressional reps over the summer in DC, and when we went to visit state legislators, either in person in offices or at conferences, we always made sure that we brought their hard-to-count maps and fact sheets. And we targeted key committees, particularly Budget and Appropriations, to ensure that this information got out there. As we'll discuss, that those legislators from some of those hard-to-count districts were the ones who sponsored the legislation that eventually became the Complete Count Commission. The focus of the conversation for the legislative conversations was a little bit different than it would be with some of our other outreach. It was really focused on money, on the funding that's attached to census, the redistricting factor, and also some of the unique challenges of young children which have not been looked at as closely in previous census outreach. So step 3 is probably the one that we're still working on the most right now. We're really trying to start rolling out an education effort for our partners in the infant, toddler, and early childhood space. So we're reaching out to a lot of our partners, including child care resource referral agencies, child care providers, healthcare, preschools, and all kinds of agencies that have direct service relationships with young children and their families. And this level of education outreach is what we're hoping to get to develop a more robust plan for addressing the young child undercount in New Jersey in conjunction with whatever the state commission puts together. Okay, so the result, the Complete Count Commission legislation was passed and signed over the summer, and it included a $500,000 appropriation for the commission as well as some of the outreach efforts. Although that's not a huge amount of money when thinking about the kind of outreach that will be necessary, it was at least a sign that the state recognizes the importance of an accurate count. And we've also started seeing some local focus on young child undercount at some of the local Complete Count Commissions, which Nesreen mentioned, as well as with some specific providers and other umbrella organizations that are interested in this issue. Okay, so what's next? So in January, the first meeting of the state's Complete Count Commission will actually occur, but we are having a separate meeting for early childhood stakeholders at which our local census office will be represented, as well as other stakeholders that have information or insights into an accurate count for young children. We're developing a plan for a young child undercount reduction and to ensure that all children are counted. And finally, we're trying to move towards additional funding for outreach and education, either from the state or from philanthropy. All right, so as Nesreen alluded to, the clock is already ticking, and particularly with this year's budget, this year's fiscal year budget is probably going to overlap with April 1st, 2020. Commissions take time to get started. Our commission was approved in August. First meeting has yet to occur. And recommendations that the commissions put forward need time to be implemented. So, really, if this is an issue that you're interested in but haven't been sure how to become engaged on, now is the time to take action. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. So Adam, I believe I've turned you on. Unmuted you. Can you just test that for a sec?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Great. Folks, please do keep putting your questions in the Q&A box. And Adam, we may go over, because I know people have a lot of questions, but we're going to take Adam's questions first at the end of his presentation because he has to get off the line to talk with the governor's staff, and that's been rescheduled a couple of times and he can't miss it. So please listen, please put your questions in the chat box, and we'll take questions to Adam first when he's done. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much, Deb, and it's great to be on this call. I'm learning a lot myself, and I'm Adam Sotak with NC Child. I'm the Public Engagement Director here, and we also are a statewide nonprofit child advocacy organization. I think we have a fairly similar mission and purview as the AC&J folks do, and we work on a wide range of different issues and have really honed in on the census here in the last couple years and leading up to 2020 as an important area of work for all the reasons that have been shared already. Our mission is, as I'm sharing here, that I'll just quickly review, is really to provide opportunities for children here in North Carolina through advancing public policies. And we're really working on that and going through a race equity lens as well as a strong focus on economic mobility. And again, that's why the census fits in so well with our mission as far as getting every child counted so that we can pull down the amount of federal dollars that we need and really have an accurate sense of children in our community. So, just to give you a quick overview of kind of what we're facing here in North Carolina, we've got about 73,000 young children that are at risk of being missed in the 2020 census. We estimate that we missed about 30,000 children in the 2010 census, and these are young children that come from hard-to-count communities all across North Carolina. We also have a large population of children of color, even increasingly diverse as you get down and look at younger children, as was the case in New Jersey, as was shared. Our overall population isn't as diverse as New Jersey's, but nevertheless we have a we have a large, growing, diverse population in North Carolina, and we're one of these places where it's like, folks just keep showing up. We've got over 10 million people in North Carolina now, at least, and that number has just boomed over the past 10 years, 10, 15 years. And so that's another factor when we look at really wanting to get an accurate count and trying to figure that out here in our state. When we look at the kind of the federal money, and this is based on some of that George Washington research that I know folks on the call are familiar with, and we look at the dollars that are being pulled down in North Carolina, we're looking at more than $5 billion of federal funding for children's services, that are allocated through the census count in one way or another. And that's part of a larger $16 billion total that we pull down in federal funds per year. So all of these programs that are listed here obviously have a strong correlation to the census and getting an accurate census count of our children. Moving on, NC Child, we've been kind of at the center of a lot of the census advocacy work that's been happening in North Carolina over the past couple years. We've received some funding through the Annie E. Casey Foundation and some other foundation resources to really try to get the ball rolling and build a coalition in North Carolina. Some of the main partners that we've been working with are our Civic Voices Table, Blueprint North Carolina, which is a large network of nonprofits working on civic engagement issues, and we've been connected with them. NALEO, National Association of Latino Elected Officials, they have a staff person here in North Carolina, and as many of you know, they're very active and involved in census work, and so we've been able to collaborate with them a lot. And then this organization that's kind of formed and come together through all of this, the NC Counts Coalition, which is hosted by another nonprofit but has specifically kind of grown up as a way to advocate for full and accurate census count and help promote the idea of building complete count committees at the state and local levels, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the framework that we're working within here in North Carolina. So here's some of the things that we've been up to along with other organizations over the past nearly 2 years now in order to advocate. We've done a lot of work together trying to advocate for census funding and always kind of using the framework of the young child undercount and, our desire to reduce that in that framework when we're talking about needing full federal census funding for the census. And so we've done some sign-on letters, some direct advocacy. We've, even gone to Washington, D.C. and met with some of the North Carolina congressional staff and had meetings back at home. We also got really actively engaged in the LUCA coordination and, worked a lot with partners to do outreach to cities and counties to get them to sign up for the LUCA process, and ended up having a large contingency. The vast majority of our counties sign up, and a lot of our municipalities sign up to do that process, and that was a good process as an advocacy community too, because it helped us have some specific goals that we were working to and kind of build relationships in our own coalition, and also build some trust and some working relationships with the governor's office and their census liaison, Bob Coates, who so then they kind of see that the advocacy community is really engaged and out there and doing some good work. And then another thing that we did, which was a great tactic, and the Census Project and some others helped pull this together, was we had this ethnic media roundtable here in North Carolina where we did a press event for ethnic media and had a really diverse group of media there, and we're able to learn a lot and have a good discussion back and forth. And as you all may imagine, some of that discussion centered around the citizenship question and potential repercussions and things like that. So all of that work there has kind of led up to the development of our State Complete Count Commission. So we, along with other organizations, advocated with our Governor Roy Cooper, to create this state complete count committee. And, to his credit and to many on his staff's credit, they were already there in a lot of ways. They kind of understand the importance, but I think we've really been able to, again, shed more light on the need to have a good, strong, robust complete count committee. And so our governor created an executive order that created the commission for us. And we were able to provide input as far as potential good members of that complete count committee. Other organizations, of course, chimed in, and they've had their first meeting already. And one of our staff people, Whitney Tucker, is on the complete count committee, and some other child advocates. And through all of this work, we're even going to be able to help develop and move forward a young children committee, subcommittee within the North Carolina State Complete Count Committee. So we're doing whatever we can to promote those issues and those talking points and action items through the State Complete Count Committee's work. And it's a good, diverse group of people that they've placed on the committee that span geographies across the state, a lot of different important constituencies, et cetera. There's about 30 people that are active and involved in that. One thing that we're going to do moving forward also is to advocate for state-level funding. That's something that we'll have to get done through our state legislature, and that's not going to be an easy task, but we're going to be asking for something in the tune of $1 million of state money to help with the work of the State Complete Count Committee, with resources and outreach and some of the many things that need to be done. And we'll be working along with members of the State Complete Count Committee and the governor's office and others to try to advocate and make that happen. And so really what you've got here in North Carolina now is this kind of wheel of the gears here of three different major players. The U.S. Census Bureau, of course, and all the work that they're doing and starting to open regional offices and hiring more partnership specialists, et cetera, the State Complete Count Commission, which has now been developed, and then also the NC Counts Census Task Force, which is the group of nonprofits and other advocates that we're involved with and have been talking about that really is going to provide a lot of the legwork, per se, in reaching out across the state and trying to get as many local complete count committees developed and moving forward as we move towards the census. A couple other things we're doing is we're continuing to do some research and fact sheets. We're coming out with a brief soon about the potential undercount of Latinx children, especially if the citizenship question is included on the census form. We also talk a lot about the economic impacts and provide fact sheets. We are doing a lot of public education and presentations to different groups across the state about the importance of the census, as well as starting to gear up with our social media presence. We're going to develop a couple videos that we can share and try to get out there over the next year or so. The first video will really be targeted to community leaders on why it's important that they get engaged in the census process, and the second video will be more focusing on parents of young children and trying to go directly to those folks to say be counted as we get closer to Census Day. And, the engagement aspect, we're going to continue to build the coalition and grow partnerships, work with the State Complete Count Committee, and also do some direct lobbying for some potential funding. So that's a little overview of what we're up to in North Carolina. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you, Adam. And people, if you've got a question for Adam, please put it in the chat box now. While you're thinking about that, I do want to flag one thing. We, at the National Hub for the Undercount of Young Children, we have a website called countallkids.org, and we blog there regularly about young child undercount issues. One of the recent blogs that we put up is a blog about estimating the funding that you need for a complete count committee. And we did that in part because people were coming up with widely different amounts, and there were some rumors in some states that the Census Bureau was recommending 10 cents a person, and in fact they do not have a recommendation, and their press office was kind enough to give us a formal statement on that. So if you're working to form a complete count committee and trying to figure out how to estimate the costs, I recommend you check that out, and I'll make sure that we put a link to that in the email that also has the slides and the recording and some other resources. Nez, I don't see any questions to Adam, so if you need to get off, Adam, I want to say thank you very much. This was wonderful, and we will go ahead and take some questions that we have for other speakers. And the first one that I'm going to steer to Nesreen was a question from Grace Riario that said, do you have a list of the current CCCs already created? And I should note that Alana Vega did write her to mention the list of the National Conference of State Legislatures, which has a list of legislation and executive actions. That's going to be in our follow-up email as well. But Nesreen, those are only the formal ones. Do you want to comment about some of the commissions that are not government agencies but are still doing the work?
Yeah, sure. So we don't have a public list of current CCCs, and whether we'll have one in the future, I'm not certain, but that's the status at this time. But I can tell you that the best way in any case to determine the status is to go to the county or city in your community, or of course the state if it's an SCCC, and find out where they are in the process.
Great. And then we have a question. The rest of our questions actually are not so much about CCCs as in census process generally, but if you're willing to address them, I think people would be very grateful.
Sure.
And the first one from Jonathan Chung is cybersecurity utilized to ensure online counts are correct and valid? And there are, of course, concerns about Internet security. So
Sure. A great question. So cybersecurity is foremost in the minds of the operations staff at the Decennial, and they've developed a host of mitigating strategies to address the possible exposure. There will be system monitoring going on throughout the process to ensure proper security guidelines are adhered to. We've done a lot of research of other Census Bureau programs, what other government agencies and other countries have done, in the U.S. have done, in the private sector have done to address effective cybersecurity incidents and to mitigate cybersecurity incidents. There will be auditing of systems and logs to help detect and trace any possible threats. Vulnerability analysis will be conducted, and there are plans in place for rapid response should anything occur.
Great. The next question that I'm hoping you can answer is from Ann, and it just shows Ann, which I know is wrong. The question is, there will be paper. Everyone will receive a paper survey. I thought only online and phone was available. If they're all receiving paper, why do we need to organize the availability of Wi-Fi to help our hard-to-count communities?
So the census is going to optimize self-response, and one way that we want to do that is to enable respondents to choose internet, paper, or telephone response. We will be encouraging online internet response primarily, but we will give the option, if requested, for respondents to respond via paper. And they can also call our customer support center to respond via the phone as well. So the default will be internet.
Do you happen to know if the paper surveys will be sent to post office boxes? They were not apparently in 2010.
So the post office boxes are enumerated, units that have P.O. boxes rather, are enumerated via an operation called the update leave. So what usually happens there is that the units with the PO boxes receive a questionnaire packet delivered to them, in which they will be encouraged still primarily to respond online, but will have the option also, as every other household will have, to respond via paper or via telephone if they are more comfortable with those other modes.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And then the last question that we've got so far actually goes back to something you said at the beginning of your presentation, which was about the format of the online questions. Someone asked what that format will be, and will they be required to answer every question in order to submit? What happens if someone skips a question?
Okay, well, the format of the question, if you mean what questions there will be, that the form will be asking the same questions we asked in 2010. So the basic demographic questions, age, sex, race, Hispanic origin, and also basic housing unit questions, whether the housing unit was occupied or vacant, whether it's owner or rental occupied. And then there will also be an additional question that will be the citizenship status question. Now, if any question is left unanswered, there may be follow-up from the Census Bureau, because that will flag us that that's an incomplete form, so that household could receive follow-up.
Got it. So
Okay.
Does anyone else have questions, either for Nesreen or for the folks from New Jersey? And we do, in fact, have a question here. Can you go through the process of how someone requests a paper form? Isn't it true that everyone's mailed a postcard first? What is the process?
Yeah, let me. I think there's a really good flow chart that I saw earlier in the detailed operation plan that I want to find for you. Let me see if I could find it really quick and switch over to that flow chart. But essentially, let me find it. Okay, so I have it up. If you want to give me a moment, I'm going to switch to share mode.
Okay.
And I'm going to share my
Is it cooperating?
I guess I can. I'll just share my desktop. That would actually be easier. Okay. And then I don't have to. Okay, so hopefully you can all see this is a public document. It's our operational plan available on census.gov. And it's basically a summary of optimizing how we're optimizing self-response. So you're going to receive notices encouraging responses, and the notices are chiefly going to really encourage you to go online to respond. But if you in those notices, you will be told that if you would like to request a paper form, you can do so, and a paper form will be sent to you if you request for it to be sent to you. So that's essentially how the paper forms will be dispersed, with the exception of special campaigns such as group order enumerations and that update leave campaign that I already mentioned that would happen for housing units that are tied to PO boxes. Does that answer the question?
I'm going to let Sarah respond. I'm afraid we're bouncing back and forth here between the online questions and the paper ones. So we have a follow-up now from the online questions, which is, will it be like an online survey where a question with an asterisk makes it so you can't submit the questionnaire at all? For example, if someone skips the citizenship question, can they submit at the end, or will it show incomplete and flag the question for the enumerator?
Honestly, that is the one question I've been asked so far that I am not sure about. I don't know if there'll be any required fields. I know what you mean with the asterisks when you're filling online forms. You can't proceed unless they're all completed, and I'm not sure. I can say that if the forms are incomplete, that follow-up is possible. That much I know.
Okay. So now we have some other questions. This one is from Casey Farmer. I read that the Census Bureau had a task force on children ages 0 to 5, and they recommended that the instructions on the census form explicitly say count adults, children, and babies. Is that recommendation going to be used?
Yes, the Census Bureau does have an initiative and a recommendation specifically focusing on getting families with children under 5 counted. And there's actually an infographic that I can share out via Deb that will have the best practices for doing that the Census Bureau created in-house.
That'd be great. I'd love to share it out.
Sure, great.
So then the next question is, we're really getting a lot about the general process. How are Internet respondent addresses validated? Does it require a U.S. Census Bureau employee?
How are they validated? So if they're talking about how I may want to hear a little more about how they're validated just so I know. Are you talking about how do we know if we have all the addresses in the country? If that's what the questioner means, we do it in a number of ways. We do the in-office address canvassing, the operation I was describing where clerks sit in front of computers and look at photos to determine if it looks like housing unit, an older photo of a housing unit area and a more current photo. If it looks like the same, the photo looks the same, they check it off as consistent. If it doesn't, then they flag those photos that show difference so that in-field address canvassers can be dispatched to the field, which they will be dispatched in August of next year to investigate where the new housing units are. In some cases, it's not new housing units. You know, properties are built and destroyed over the years. So that's definitely one way. Another way is a campaign. We work with local governments, local update of census addresses. That campaign was primarily conducted last year through this year. Local governments we send the local governments lists of addresses that we have, and they verify those lists or give us any changes that they have. That is a voluntary campaign, but a lot of governments across the country do participate.
So just to follow up on that question, she said the previous slide said a unique ID was not needed to fill out the census form, but validation was needed. And I think this is most relevant for people who aren't filling it out at home. They go somewhere else and fill it out. Does that help clarify things a little?
Okay. So this is in the context of
you go to the library and you don't have your number with you, you can still fill it out, right? How does it get validated then?
That is correct. If the questioner was referring to this particular, you will receive a pre-assigned ID, but it's not required if you don't have it because we still do want to get a response. But all Internet responses will be validated to prevent fraudulent submissions. So even though you won't need that unique ID, although you will be encouraged to use it, you can still enumerate, and it will still be validated by the Census Bureau to prevent fraudulent submissions.
So you've been extraordinarily patient with us. I'm going to ask you to bear with us one more minute and ask you one more question because it's specific to young children, and then I think we're going to thank you very much and close the webinar. But the question that's specific to young children is it's from the Complete Count Committee and Alameda County Executive Director. I heard from Census Bureau staff that once you've completed your census form, you will not be able to go back and make edits. If somebody forgets or doesn't include their child on the form, how can they rectify that undercount?
Wow, I think I'm stumped again on that one. There definitely should be a way to rectify an undercount. I don't know operationally how that will be conducted right at this moment. But please keep that question alive so that we can get you an answer. I will take it back to the operations staff and see if I can get you an answer now. If I can't, because they haven't worked out that level of detail yet, there certainly will be a response provided at some point.
Great, and that is a wonderful and a really important question. So I'm going to follow up also with Francesca offline because she had a follow-up, and we'll get that. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. I know we went long, but also people clearly had some very significant questions about how it works. I encourage you all to try and get complete count committees started in your state or your locality. And I very much want to thank Alana and Peter and Nesreen for joining us today and for being so patient with us as we took this webinar longer than I'd expected. But it was really good quality information, and I wanted to make sure everyone got it. You will all get the recording. You will get the slides. Nesreen is going to send me some additional materials. I'll give you the link to the blog on how to calculate funding for complete count committees, and we'll try and get you answers to the questions that were not answered. And I appreciate this very much. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.